the youngest Member of Parliament in over 200 years, intermixing socialism, feminism and republicanism to fight for her belief of Ireland. Bernadette Devlin was born in 1947. She was the third of 6 children, her mother and her father both strong Republicans. And although her mother died when she was 19 and her father died when she was only 9, she still inherited the strong Republican sense of wanting to unite Ireland, of wanting one Ireland. When she was 19, Bernadette left for university in Belfast. There she intended to study psychology. However, at this time at the university, a lot of the students were beginning to turn away from the revolutionary Sinn Féin movement and the traditional nationalist movement. Instead, they were aiming for civil rights appropriate for any UK citizen, because at this time in Ireland, especially in Northern Ireland, there was a lot of discrimination against the Catholics. For example, the votes were often gerrymandered and public housing was not appropriate. Bernadette Devlin was a strong believer in gaining civil rights for Northern Ireland, for her people of Northern Ireland. So she became one of the founders of the People's Democracy. This was a student-run democracy which sought to emulate the tactics of the African Americans by conducting a series of protest marches throughout Northern Ireland for civil rights. Their most famous march was their march from Belfast to Derry. This was famous because although it had permission to go on the civil rights march, it was still assaulted by the police authorities for being merely a Catholic uprising. Although it was a civil rights march and a majority of the people in this march were non-Catholics, it was still dismissed as a Catholic uprising. In 1969, after one failed attempt to be elected, Bernadette Devlin was elected as a socialist and became the youngest woman ever elected to Parliament and the youngest member in over 200 years. Bernadette Devlin was famous for representing every Irish man or woman, the ordinary working class people of Northern Ireland, the people who usually didn't get a say. She was their voice. In the famous Battle of Bogside in 1969, the very same year that she was elected, which was an attempt to try and exclude the police from the Catholic area of Bogside, because at this time, the police in this area were often violent and biased against the Catholics. Bernadette Devlin was central in urging the construction of barricades during this conflict. After this conflict, it led to the intense community strife without Belfast. And this led to the English sending in their British peacekeepers. And many people say that the English sending in their British peacekeepers was the start of the Northern Troubles that continued throughout Northern Ireland for many years afterwards. After the Battle of Bogside, Bernadette Devlin made her maiden speech in Parliament, and I'm going to read an extract of it now. I understand that in making my maiden speech on the day of my arrival in Parliament, and in making it on a controversial issue, I flaunt the unwritten traditions of this House, but I think that the situation of my people merits the flaunting of such traditions. As the honorary gentleman rightly said, there never was born an Englishman who understands the Irish people. Thus, a man who is alien to the ordinary working Irish people cannot understand them, and I therefore respectfully suggest that the honorary gentleman has no understanding of my people, the ordinary people, because Catholics and Protestants are the ordinary people, the oppressed people from whom I come from and whom I represent. I stand here as the youngest woman in Parliament, in the same tradition as the first woman ever to be elected to this Parliament, Constance Markievicz, who was elected on behalf of the Irish people. This debate comes much too late for the people of Ireland, since it concerns itself particularly with the action in Derry last weekend. I will do my best to dwell on the action in Derry last weekend. However, it is impossible to consider the activity of one weekend in a city such as Derry without considering the reasons why these things happen. had never hoped to see the day when I might agree with someone who represents the bigoted and sectarian Unionist Party, which uses a deliberate policy of dividing the people in order to keep the ruling minority in power and the oppressed people of Ulster oppressed. I never thought that I should see the day when I might agree with any phrase uttered by the representative of such a party, but the honorary gentleman sums up the situation to a T. He refers to stark human misery. That is what I saw in Bogside. It has not been there for just one night, it has been there for over 50 years. And that same stark human misery is to be found in the Protestant fountain area, which the honorary gentleman would claim to represent. There is no place in society for us, the ordinary peasants of Northern Ireland. There is no place for us in a society of landlords because we are the have-nots and they are the haves. When the students marched from Belfast to Derry, there was a predominant number of Protestants. The number of non-Catholics was greater than the number of Catholics. Nevertheless, we were still beaten into the Catholic area because it was in the interest of the minority and the Unionist Party to establish that we were nothing more than a Catholic uprising. There are a lot of nasty people going around, and if you are not careful, you will all end up in the IRA. What kind of Ulster do you want? Come with me and I will give you an Ulster you can be proud to live in. Bernadette Devlin was clearly famous for representing the ordinary people from which she came from, the ordinary people who didn't get a say. She gave them a voice. That very same year, Bernadette Devlin travelled to the United States, where she was handed the keys to New York, and there she handed these over to the Black Panthers, the radical racial group. While she was in the United States, she alienated many of the older, more conservative members because these were strong supporters of the Irish Republican Army. And although Bernadette Devlin considered herself a Republican, she wanted to unite Ireland. She didn't believe in using violence to get there. When Bernadette Devlin returned back to Ireland in 1970, she was re-elected to Westminster, and then she was arrested and imprisoned for her involvement in the Bogside disorder for 6 months. After the Bloody Sunday incident, Bernadette Devlin physically attacked the Home Secretary. The Bloody Sunday was an incident where the British killed 13 unarmed Northern Ireland protesters on a march for civil rights. The British claimed that the protesters attacked first. However, all evidence shows that the protesters were unarmed. Therefore, the British killed 13 innocent protesters. In 1981, Bernadette Devlin was shot at in an attempted assassination by members of the Unionist Ulster Defence Association. She was shot in the arm, the chest and the thigh, being shot at 8 times. Bernadette Devlin recovered and continued working for her people, the Irish people. She supported the gays and the lesbians in the St. Patrick's Day parade, and when her daughter was arrested in 1996, connected to an IRA bombing, which was a symbolic arrest because her daughter was not actually involved in this bombing, she stated, "I have 3 children, and not if the British government takes all of them will it stop me imposing the inhumanity and the injustice of this state." Today, in this society where racism, sexism and inhumanity are still everywhere, almost 70 years from when Bernadette Devlin was born, Bernadette Devlin sends an empowering message for young women everywhere. She tells them that you can stand up for what you believe in, whether it be your religion, your race, or simply your passion. As she once said, "We were born into an unjust system. We are not prepared to grow old in it."